Hello, my name is Xavier Robert, coming to you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State. A very good evening to you, and today on Worldview, Russia is to stick to agreed limits on nuclear missiles and keep informing the United States about changes in its deployments. Experts hint on how North Korea is currently experiencing critical food crisis. 10 Palestinians killed during Israeli military raid in occupied West Bank. Now, details of these stories and more in a moment. First on Worldview today, the U.S. President Joe Biden has rallied NATO allies in Poland, proclaiming unwavering support for Kiev as his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin announces suspension of Moscow's role in nuclear arms treaty with Washington. Fresh from his surprise visit to Ukraine, Biden used Tuesday's trip to garner support for Ukraine as the war enters its second year with no end in sight. Biden spoke after meeting NATO ally and Polish President Andrzej Duda, a vocal proponent of stronger Western support for Kiev. The declaration followed an unannounced trip on Monday to Ukraine, marking the first time in recent memory that a U.S. president made a journey to a war zone not controlled by U.S. troops. Poland has NATO's longest border with Ukraine and has been the main route in for weapons and out for refugees. The two leaders were expected to have discussed Poland's security and scaling up NATO resources there. In his State of the Nation address before the first anniversary of the campaign in Ukraine, Putin said on Tuesday Moscow was freezing its participation in the New START Treaty, a key nuclear arms deal with Washington. Putin also accused the West of escalating the conflict and promised that Russia would keep fighting to systematically achieve its aims. The Russian leader accused Western powers of wanting to be done with U.S. once and for all, but said increasingly stringent sanctions on Russia will not succeed. Meanwhile, Russia will stick to agreed limits on nuclear missiles and keep of its last remaining arms control. The lower house, or Duma, that Russia would continue to observe agreed limits on nuclear delivery systems, meaning missiles and strategic bomber planes. RIA news agency quoted Elaine as saying it would also continue to provide Washington with notifications on nuclear deployments in order to prevent false alarms, which is important for maintaining strategic stability. Away from that now, at least 2 people have died and more than 50 others missing after a mine collapsed in northern China. President Xi Jinping ordered a search and rescue mission following the collapse at around 5:13 local time on Wednesday. Now, more than 500 rescue workers have been dispatched to the scene, and 1 person has been pulled out alive so far, according to state news agency Xinhua. The mine is located Alza in China's Inner Mongolia region. State broadcaster CCTV said a collapse had occurred in a shaft operated by Xinjiang Coal Mining Company. The mines in Inner Mongolia are some of China's top coal producers. Mining accidents are not uncommon in China, where the industry's safety regulations can be poorly enforced. In December 2020, 23 miners died after a carbon monoxide leak at a coal mine. And in January 2021, 10 miners were killed in a blast at a gold mine in Shandong province. In a separate development, experts are saying North Korea is experiencing a critical food crisis. The country is no stranger to chronic food shortages, but border controls, poor weather and sanctions have worsened the situation in recent years. Top officials are expected to meet at the end of February to discuss a fundamental change to agriculture policy, state media has said. Now, news aggregator KCNA Watch reported this is a very important and urgent task amid pressing farming issues. The news comes as Pyongyang continues its displays of military might. One state newspaper has likened using foreign aid to poison candy. On Wednesday, Rondong's Simon wrote that imperialists used aid as a trap to plunder and subjugate recipient countries. South Korea's Unification Ministry has reportedly also sounded the alarm on the food shortages and asked the World Food Programme (WFP) for help. Satellite imagery from South Korean authorities shows that the North produced 180,000 tons less food in 2022 than in 2021. Away from that, now 10 Palestinians, including an elderly man and several militants, have been killed during an Israeli military raid in the occupied West Bank. This is according to witnesses and Palestinian health officials. Explosions and gunfire sounded as troops raided the heart of Nablus, triggering armed clashes with gunmen. It is understood heavy Israeli fire was directed at a house, killing 2 senior Palestinian militants inside. The Israeli military earlier confirmed its troops were operating in Nablus. Palestinian health officials say a 72-year-old civilian was among those killed outside the besieged house amid the gun battles. A video footage further showed a body in a street next to bags of bread in what is usually a busy market area of the old city. More than 100 people were also wounded by gunfire, according to the health officials. 7 of them are in a critical condition in local hospitals. A spokesman for Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said he condemned the raid and held Israel's government responsible for the dangerous escalation, which is pushing the region toward tension and an explosion. The Palestinian militant group Hamas, which controls the Gaza Strip, warned that it was monitoring the escalating crimes conducted by the enemy against its people in the occupied West Bank and is running out of patience. The Nablus and nearby Jenin have been a focus of search, arrest, and intelligence gathering. Raids that Israel has intensified over the last year amid a spate of deadly Palestinian attacks. This latest one comes despite reports this week of an understanding brokered by the U.S. aimed at calming tensions. So far this year, at least 50 Palestinians, including militants and civilians, have been killed, while 11 people have been killed in Palestinian attacks targeting Israelis. Away from that, now France is facing drought restrictions after its driest winter for more than 60 years. Following a month of no significant rainfall, the country is now in a state of alert. Ecological Transition Minister Christophe Béchu has said local officials will gather on Monday to assess the situation territory by territory. Last year was France's hottest year on record, according to National Weather Agency Météo France. Records were broken elsewhere in Europe, in the UK, Spain and Italy. The hot temperatures triggered drought conditions that many regions are yet to recover from. Snowfall in the Italian Alps is down by 53%, and water levels in the Po basin of Italy's largest river are 61% below normal, according to researchers. A state of emergency was declared last July in 5 northern regions surrounding the river Po because of the 2022 drought. Low tides in Venice have meant gondolas and water taxis are unable to move around because of muddy canals, and the foundations of buildings in the Grand Canal have become exposed. Meanwhile, a high school student has stabbed a Spanish teacher to death in a school in the French town of Saint-Jean-de-Laux. French government spokesperson Olivier Véran confirmed Wednesday's attack and said the perpetrator was 16-year-old. Police attended St. Thomas d'Aquin School with the local prosecutor, where the student was arrested. A French newspaper Start Quest said the attacker entered the classroom while the Spanish teacher was giving a class and attacked her. The local media reported that the teacher was in her 50s and died of cardiac arrest after emergency services arrived at the school. France's Education Minister Pape Ndiaye said in a tweet that His thoughts were with the teachers, family, colleagues and pupils. Local media further reported the student may have been suffering from mental health issues. They said at this stage of the investigation, there was no suggestion the incident was terror-related. Varun said in a press conference the government would support educators across the country in the wake of the incident. After the break, we have reports on Seattle becoming the first U.S. city to ban discrimination based on caste after a vote of City Council. Do stay with us.
As Nigeria prepares for the general elections holding from 25th February 2023, broadcasters are enjoined to make ethical reportage their watchword. All political programs shall observe the provisions of the Nigeria Broadcasting Code and other extant laws relating to broadcasting. All broadcasting stations must adhere to the principles of pluralism and ensure equitable airtime to all political parties or views. All political programs shall adhere to the general principles of legality, decency, and truthfulness. For the avoidance of doubt, the broadcast of a political campaign, jingle, announcement, or any other form of partisan party identification or symbol ends not later than 24 hours before polling day. Hate speech is prohibited. Be professional. NBC, your right to quality broadcasting. Announcer Management.
One truth not often told is about the transformation that Africa has undergone in recent decades. Africa is shaping its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity. On Spotlight Africa, we paint the African picture the African way, laced with truth, detail, and the color of the African continent. Join Uyai Anyekan every Tuesday and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Spotlight Africa, telling the African story.
Many thanks for staying tuned. Now in Tunisia, President Kais Saied has alleged that undocumented immigration from sub-Saharan African countries is aimed at changing Tunisia's demographic composition, drawing criticisms from human rights activists. His comments during a meeting of the National Security Council on Tuesday followed the arrests of dozens of migrants this month in a crackdown. He added that unnamed parties had over the past decade settled African migrants in Tunisia in return for money, according to comments published by the presidency online. Activists who had this week already condemned what they call hate speech directed at African migrants said the president's comments were racist. Heavily indebted Tunisia is in the grip of a long-running economic crisis, with thousands of trade unionists last week protesting across the country over worsening economic woes and the arrest of a top union official. Away from that, Iran has blamed the United States for failing to reach an agreement over a prisoner swap deal amid reports that progress had been made after a lull of several months. Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Nasser Kanani on Monday told journalists that a deal was on the verge of being clinched through intermediaries at an unannounced time, alleging further that the U.S., however, showed bad faith. Iran and the U.S. have been relaying messages since 2021 over prisoners being held on charges of espionage and circumventing sanctions. Both sides were on track to reach an agreement as part of talks to restore Iran's 2015 nuclear deal. However, since those discussions have been deadlocked for months, there were reports that the prisoner exchange could take place separately. Now, the United States has granted the extradition of Peruvian former President Alejandro Toledo over corruption allegations. Peru's Attorney General office has said adding that the country's justice system has been coordinating with national and foreign authorities for the execution of the order. Peru requested the extradition of Toledo, who served as the country's president from 2001 through 2006. In 2018, on charges he took millions of dollars in bribes from Odebrecht, a Brazilian construction company involved in an extensive corruption case across South America. Toledo was detained by U.S. authorities in 2019 but released to house arrest in 2020. Now in South Korea, the country has smashed its own record for the world's lowest fertility rate again, according to official data. The average number of expected babies per South Korean woman over her reproductive life fell to 0.78 in 2022, down from 0.81 a year earlier, according to data published by Statistics Korea on Wednesday. Now, the figure is the lowest among countries in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, which had an average rate of 1.59 in 2020 and far below 1.64 in the United States and 1.33 in Japan the same year. The South Korean capital Seoul logged the lowest birth rate of 0.59. The plummeting birth rate has stoked worry that a declining population could severely damage the South Korean economy, the world's 10th largest because of labor shortages and greater welfare spending as the number of older people increases and the number of taxpayers shrink. The government has spent 280 trillion won over the past 16 years to reverse the falling birth rate, but has failed to turn the tide. Away from that, Shamima Begum has lost her challenge over the decision to deprive her of British citizenship. Despite a credible case, she was trafficked. Justice Jay told the semi-secret court dealing with her case that her appeal had been fully dismissed. The ruling means the 23-year-old remains barred from returning to the UK and stuck in a camp in northern Syria. A legal team said the case was nowhere near over and the decision will be challenged. Begum was 15 years old when she traveled to join the self-styled Islamic State group in 2015. She went on to Home Secretary Sajid Javid stripped her of her British citizenship, preventing her coming home and leaving her detained as an IS supporter in a camp. The Special Immigration Appeals Commission has ruled that the decision had presented strong arguments she was a victim. In business now, the world's largest coffee chain Starbucks says it is launching a line of olive oil-infused drinks in Italy. Chief Executive Howard Schultz says olive oil's unexpected velvety, buttery flavor enhanced the coffee and lingers beautifully on the palate. Starbucks is among the major U.S. businesses that have faced obstacles as they try to expand into the Italian food and drinks market. Italy's coffee scene is famous for its independent and often family-run cafes. Starbucks currently has around 20 stores in the country. Away from that, now the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have reportedly dismissed claims the Worsley tour features two characters who bear told people it's all frankly nonsense, totally baseless, boring reports. Now, the 22-minute episode promoting his book around the world, Stan Marsh, one of the show's main characters, spoke demeaningly of the fictional couple. Now, J.K. Rowling has said she is not concerned about how the backlash to her position on transgender issues will affect her legacy, and that anyone who thinks she has profoundly misunderstood her. The Harry Potter author has been called transphobic for her views on gender identity and the question of allowing trans women into women-only spaces. Speaking in a new podcast, Rowling said she never meant to upset anyone, referring to fans who claim she has ruined her legacy. Rowling said they could not have misunderstood her more profoundly. Rowling has attracted extensive criticisms for a series of comments voicing concerns about how trans issues affect women's rights and her opposition to Scotland's gender recognition bill. Her position has been interpreted by some as transphobic, leading to calls for a boycott of the Harry Potter franchise, ranging from its books and movies to the blockbuster video game Hogwarts Legacy. And lastly, on Worldview today, Seattle has become the first U.S. city to ban discrimination based on castes after a vote by the city council. Councilwoman Sharma Sawant, who wrote the legislation, said the fight against caste bias is deeply connected to the fight against all forms of oppression. Advocates of the ban say that it is needed to prevent caste bias from becoming more prevalent in the U.S. The caste system in India dates back over 3,000 years and divides Hindu society into rigid hierarchical groups. The ordinance passed by Seattle on Tuesday follows similar bans on caste bias that have been introduced on the campuses of U.S. universities in recent years. And with that, we wrap up our package for you on Worldview today. Do ensure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtv.ng. My name is Xavier Robert, reaching you from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, and you've been watching Worldview on Spectrum TV. And do enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.